The state motto of Wyoming, the epitome of the western frontier, is equal rights. That's right, the nation's least populous state, most known for jackalopes, Yellowstone Park, and cold, is the equality state. So named because it was the first state in the Union to allow women to vote, and also the first state to have a woman governor. So how exactly did this frontier land of cowboys get on the cutting edge of gender equality? Well, in a uniquely Wyoming way that included some surprising frontier politics that managed to bamboozle the patriarchy in Washington, D.C., in what was at the time called the only thoroughly trained and fully equipped girl guards in the world. It is history that deserves to be remembered. Wyoming's connection with women's suffrage began in 1869, shortly after it was first organized as a territory. In 1870, the estimated population of the state was a mere 9,118, well short of the 60,000 required by the Northwest Ordinance to apply for statehood. The territorial government was officially organized on April 17, 1869, and the first legislative assembly in December of that year would do something unique. Written into the territorial constitution was that every woman of the age of 21 years residing in this territory may, at any election, beholden under the laws thereof, cast her vote. And her right of the election franchise and to hold office shall be the same under the election laws of the territory as those of electors. It passed with almost no discussion or controversy. Exactly how and why this section was passed in the remote, sparsely populated frontier is a curiosity. Wyoming historian C.G. Coutant wrote that one man told me that he thought it right and just to give women the vote. Another man said that he thought it would be a good advertisement for the territory. Still another said that he voted to please someone else, and so on. There is persistent speculation that that provision might have been to encourage a specific type of westward immigration. Women were always scarce on the western frontier, and offering suffrage might have been an attempt to get, well, brides for Wyoming cowboys. The newspaper Cheyenne Leader said, "We expect now at once quite an immigration of ladies to Wyoming." Territorial Secretary Edward Lee claimed it began as a joke. Once, during the session, amid the greatest hilarity and after the presentation of various funny amendments, and in the full expectation of a gubernatorial veto, an act was passed enfranchising the women of Wyoming. Well, some of the legislators may well have seen the bill as a joke. It certainly wasn't to William Bright, who wrote it. His wife later said that Bright thought that if all men could vote, there didn't seem to be a reason that his wife and mother couldn't as well. Bright was a bona fide suffragist and told the Denver Tribune, "I knew it was a new issue, and a live one, and with strong feeling that it was just. I determined to use all my influence." John Hoyt, later a territorial governor, said that Bright cleverly maneuvered the legislature to pass the bill. Bright told the supportive Democrats that if the governor vetoes it, we shall have made a point, and we'll have shown our liberality and lost nothing. To the Republican opponents, he convinced them that the bill was a ploy to make them look anti-woman, and that voting for the bill would ruin that statement, and that anyway, the Republican governor would certainly veto it. So when the bill came to a vote, it went right through. The members looked at each other in astonishment, for they hadn't intended to do it, quite. John A. Campbell, a brevet brigadier general who served in the Civil War, was appointed first governor of the territory by President Grant. At 15, he had attended the 1850 Ohio Women's Rights Convention. One wonders what he might have been thinking when he signed the bill into law on December 10th, a date later commemorated as Wyoming Day. The Wyoming Tribune reported that the bill is likely to be the measure of the session, and we are glad our legislature has taken the initiative in this movement, which is destined to become universal. Susan B. Anthony praised the bill, claiming that Wyoming is the first place on God's green earth which could consistently claim to be the land of the free. Though women had briefly been allowed to vote in New Jersey, the bill was the first in U.S. history that explicitly granted women the right to vote. It also led to the first female-appointed Justice of the Peace in South Pass City, and the first women jurors, though they were eventually banned from jury duty in 1871. After they were granted the right, people wondered, would they vote? Of the roughly 1,000 women eligible in the state in 1870, it seems most of them did. In fact, their mere presence seems to have elevated the entire activity. Bill Nye, and no, not the science guy, but the 19th century founder of the newspaper The Laramie Boomerang, which, and I am not kidding here, was named after his mule, wrote of the election, "No rum was sold. Women rode in carriages that were provided by the two parties, and every man was straining himself to act a gentleman, because there were votes at stake." Louisa Swain, in Nye's hometown of Laramie, is considered to be the first woman to have voted in Wyoming. However, if Democrats had expected to be rewarded for giving women the vote, they found themselves routed in the 1870 election. The remaining Democrats even attempted to repeal women's suffrage, but Governor Campbell vetoed the measure. "No legislature has the right to disenfranchise its own constituents," he argued. Even so, the legislature missed overturning that veto by just a single vote. By 1889, Wyoming was looking close to that 60,000 mark. They believed that the 1890 census would prove it, and it eventually did with an enumeration of 62,555, a threefold increase from the population in 1880. But the issue of women's suffrage was no less contentious in 1889 than it was in 1868. Francis E. Warren was appointed governor for his second stint in 1889 and hoped to press the issue. Population was the main obstacle, but Warren and other Wyoming politicians knew that the state's position on suffrage was likely to cause some debate. Ignoring that Congress didn't pass an enabling act, Warren scheduled the election of constitutional delegates for July 8, 1889. No women ran for a delegate slot. Perhaps they knew that it would be seen as a step too far by Congress. All of the legislative work had to move quickly. In order to be considered with a slew of other western states, Wyoming needed to get its proposal, and therefore a constitution, before the end of its current session. That meant they needed a constitution presented to the territory for voting by November of 1889. They had only 25 working days to draft the state constitution. They cut and pasted from other states liberally, but retained women's suffrage, with the Constitution reading that the rights of citizens of the state of Wyoming to vote and hold office shall not be denied or abridged on account of sex. It would have been expedient to ditch the issue for the sake of statehood, but support in the state was strong, as evidenced by the October 1889 debut of the all-female militia company, Company K. The origin of Company K can be traced to a single book. In 1883, Lieutenant Hugh Reed published Broom Tactics, or Calisthenics, in new form for young ladies. It was advertised as a very desirable book for young ladies wishing to learn something of military drill. The concept proved to be more than just a novelty. Women's aid societies began forming broom brigades to fundraise. Women in uniform drilling with brooms was a sure way to draw a crowd. On June 22, 1883, the Wyoming capital of Cheyenne saw its first broom brigade. Newspapers reported that 18 or 20 of Cheyenne's most charming and accomplished ladies will give an exhibition of their skill and proficiency in wielding this woman's weapon. Admission was 50 cents for adults, 25 cents for children under 12. The Presbyterian Women's Aid hosted a military-style drill with 21 boys and girls who performed with rifles instead of brooms. On October 22, 1889, debuted their all-female rifle drill team at the Merchant Carnival at Keefe Hall in Cheyenne. The group of young women aged 12 to 18 were not just pretty in uniform. They were the only fully trained company of girl militias in the nation. They were trained by Colonel Frank Stitzer, a Civil War veteran who distinguished himself at the battles of South Mountain, Bull Run, and Antietam, and would later become the Wyoming State Adjutant General. The 24 athletic beauties described in the paper were introduced by a reverend, who facetiously introduced them as Company K, which seems most likely to have been a comment upon the girls' ages, mostly from 12 to 16, that they were a company of kids. Colonel Stitzer was a part of a Company K in the 48th Pennsylvania during the Civil War as well, but there's no evidence that it had any connection to the girls' title. They held carved wooden rifles and were orchestrated by the colonel in a display of military maneuvers, manual drills, flanks, obliques, and cross patterns. The Cheyenne Daily Sun said the company became, in the colonel's hands, a fairy machine. Another paper wrote that they moved with the military precision of veterans and executed the most complicated movements without a sign of confusion, even though they may have had as little as a single month to practice. Soldiers from the nearby Fort D.A. Russell applauded the performance, saying that such drilling as this company did is seldom seen anywhere. A men's Company B drill team for the fort, also trained by Stitzer, frankly admitted themselves outdone by the young ladies. Their training was thorough. Historian Dan Lyon, who wrote the definitive history on Company K in his book The Girl Guards of Wyoming, believes Company K mastered all 43 plate movements found in the Knights of Pythias Drill Tactics and Manual. The B Company drill team received a much less glowing review when the drill team was called an awkward squad by the Cheyenne Weekly Sun. Company K even participated in skirmish drills, giving them at least the appearance of being ready for war. The newspaper Cheyenne Sun even suggested that they be sent to Washington to fight in the battle for statehood, suggesting that they would make congressmen and senators surrender at discretion and admit that the women of Wyoming, at least, deserve statehood. On November 5, 1889, just a few weeks after their first performance, Wyoming voters ratified a state constitution. Company K continued to perform on November 8th for a group of Civil War veterans, and the girls were called the finest piece of composite mechanism to be found in the country. In January of 1890, they even traveled to Greeley, Colorado. Their multiple performances continued to earn them praise, with one paper writing that they go through the military tactics in a way that would be a credit to a West Point cadet. In February of 1890, the newspaper The Cheyenne Sun even published a poem in their honor. Have you seen our girl guards of Company K with their miniature muskets and their hats of gray? Have you heard the tramp of their delicate feet, keeping perfect step to a cadence sweet? In Washington, Wyoming Representative Joseph Carey pressed for Wyoming's statehood. He had suggested in the month before that Wyoming's population might be as high as 125,000, an argument that seemed silly when only 8,000 people had actually voted on the measure. He explained the discrepancy away by claiming there's but little of politics in Wyoming. Every year is an off year. In his speech supporting statehood, Carey carefully avoided saying anything about women's suffrage. The vote for statehood passed the House somewhat narrowly, 139 to 127, on March 27, 1890. Company K had inspired other girl drill squads in Wyoming, including another in Cheyenne, the so-called Company H. Formed under two lieutenants at the fort, their name seems to have come about because the 17th Infantry at the fort had companies A, C, D, and G, and H came next. Men of the 17th called them the Daughters of the Regiment. The passage of the bill in the House led Company K to prepare to appear in the Statehood Jubilee. They performed to raise money for new uniforms for the occasion, and on April 19th were ordered by Captain Emma O'Brien, daughter of a decorated soldier, to participate in honor of General Alger and Mrs. Logan. Mary Logan was a prominent member of the Women's Relief Corporation. Russell Alger was the 18th Commander-in-Chief of the Grand Army of the Republic. The girls' performance was dubbed the grand feature of the occasion. Mrs. Logan and General Alger were delighted and could not say enough in their praise. Papers across the country carried a report of the visit. Both companies performed several more times before President Benjamin Harrison finally signed the paper that made Wyoming a state on July 10, 1890. The new state invited one and all to a celebration on July 23rd to see the greatest exhibition of fireworks ever witnessed in the West, and of course the only thoroughly trained and fully equipped companies of girl guards in the world. With their new uniforms, Company K were to escort the state flag, and Company H the statehood car through the parade. Company K accompanied the flag to the speaker's platform, where Governor Warren was presented with the flag, a 44-star American flag with the words, "To Wyoming, from her women, in honor of the state constitution, 1890. One of the speakers at the event called out the girls specifically, saying, "And this young girl guard of honor, picked from the flowers of the state, who today have walked through the dusty streets that they might be beside this beloved flag, may well emulate these examples, preferring ever to sacrifice personal comfort to duty, and pride to patriotism." After the speeches, Company K made one last march before officially disbanding. Company H's last performance seems to have been on September 5th, 1890. Lyon's book, The Girl Guides of Wyoming, The Lost Women's Militia, provides biographies of many of the girls, and many of them were the daughters of leading citizens. Company K's first lieutenant was Gertrude Morgan, who was the daughter of the former territorial governor, Elliot Morgan. The second lieutenant was Lieutenant Kate Kelly, whose father was a pioneer legend, Hiram Kelly, who had made a fortune raising cattle near the town of Chugwater. Private Isabella Montgomery's father had been the very first settler in the town of Cheyenne, which would become the state capital. Unusual for the time, many of the girls ended up going to college. Several of them became teachers. They can certainly said to have been highly accomplished ladies for their time. Of course, they didn't really serve in the militia. The state constitution prohibited women from being called up for service, but the Girl Guards of Wyoming were a unique representation of the pride of Wyoming women at the time. They were girls who were happy that they were going to be allowed to vote in local elections decades ahead of the passage of the 19th Amendment. And while they might be seen as just a historical novelty for the brief period that they existed, their contribution was somewhat larger than that, because they impressed people and made a mark wherever they went. very much proving that girls could do whatever a man could do, and sometimes do it even better. I hope you enjoyed this episode of The History Guy. Check out our community on thehistoryguyguild.locals.com, our webpage at thehistoryguy.com, and our merchandise at teespring.com, or book a special message from The History Guy on Cameo. And if you'd like more episodes on Forgotten History, all you have to do is subscribe.